Every leader eventually faces this moment, the handoff.
And when it's done right, it's not just a transition, it's a transformation.
Today, Frank and I are pulling back the curtain on our own leadership shift right here at Generis.
We're talking legacy, calling, and what it really takes to steward a mission into the future.
What's at stake when succession goes wrong? And what's possible when it's done with trust and vision?
This is not the end of a story. It's the start of a new one, and we want you in on it.
Hello, friends. Jim Shepard here with my co-host, Frank Beeler.
Hey-o.
Live for another edition of the Next Sunday podcast.
When we're at the Creator House again.
Back at the Creator House. We love this. Orlando, Florida. We come in here and we knock out some episodes, very professional. The lighting, we look a lot better than we probably should at here.
Yeah,
Frank.
which could be concerning for those watching on video because they're like, if this is when you look your best, wow, I'd hate to see you in an underwhelming environment.
And those who've met us in person are like, wait, that's Jim and Frank?
That's them. That's them.
Hey, today we're doing an episode that I think is not only going to be helpful, but this episode is very personal to you and to me.
Absolutely.
Very personal. But it's about a topic that I think a lot of people want to know about. And so what we're going to talk about today is succession and transition.
Yeah.
And specifically, the succession and transition that we're undergoing right now at Generis.
We're in the thick of it.
We made an announcement. You did know we made an announcement.
I did hear that. I read something online.
Read it online. I meant to give you a heads up before it went online. But so in February of 2025, we have announced that we have really completed the transition where my longtime role as CEO now becomes chairman.
Yeah.
And Frank becomes the CEO of Generis.
Yeah.
And then the other party that's not in the room here with us, Brandon Harris, who's been our Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, becomes our President and Chief Operating Officer. And along with Leanne Cornell, the four of us are the executive team at Generis. And it's for us, it's really, I think the reason we decided to do an episode on this is so many people have been surprised at how seamless this is and how much fun you and I are having in this season.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't seem to be the majority report on transition and succession, especially in church world.
In fact, there's been some wise counsel and feedback that we might be doing some things wrong along the way because it doesn't compute or doesn't match up with their previous experiences. Mm-hmm. And so we just want to process why we're choosing to do some of the things that we're doing, where we're being comfortable, and where we think early on there's some fruit from this. And I agree with you wholeheartedly when you say we're having a great time. Like, I feel fully empowered quickly and early, which is awesome and necessary. At the same time, you're there providing wisdom and insight, but not in a odd, awkward dynamic. Like it seems to be working. When I say seems, I don't know what I don't know, but the home office team is happy. Our leaders out in the field, the consultants that we get to work with, we're getting great feedback. And so
I think
that's
right.
Feels like God's really blessing this. And so we're just wanting to process out loud some of our experiences and what we've seen just over the last few months. And hopefully it'll be helpful to you. Yeah.
So when you said fully empowered, Frank, is that moment when you brought that little issue to me early on, thinking that I would take it and run with it?
Yeah.
And I looked at you and I said, I think the CEO of Generis ought to handle that right there. And you're like, oh, okay.
That's exactly right. And I was fully ready to handle it. I just didn't think you would let me. Honestly, I thought this was going to be one of those moments where it's like, okay, we're going to have to figure out what this transition really looks like because this is something that you are passionate about, that you would have normally taken care of and taken care of it immediately. It wasn't some like little thing. It was something you would have jumped on immediately and handled. And so when I brought it to you, I thought you were going to be like, hey, thanks for taking it that far. I'll take it from here. And I was fully prepared to hopefully not be upset about it. Like I was like, this is one of these things that we're going to have to figure out.
Yeah.
And then when you looked at me and goes, I think you'll handle this just fine. And let me know if you need anything. And Honestly, I just turned and walked away. I didn't even say
I walked
anything
away
else.
too.
I was like, okay, end of conversation.
I think the CEO of Generis ought to handle
That's
that.
right.
And you're the CEO of Generis, so I
That's
think
right.
that means you're handling that. And
That's
let
really
me just say up front, Frank, my role, I'm not technically a founder. The company started in 1989. I came in 1992. But I am a near founder. It's taken me a while to embrace that because I respect so much the two men who did, actually found the firm. But I've in the last few years, I've really embraced that. I kind of denied it for a long time, but I've embraced it. Yeah, I am a near founder. I really am. And what I would say to anybody who's a founder or a near founder, whether it be a church or any organization, guys, you're going to have to stare yourself in the mirror about this stuff before it happens. And for me, one of the two of the things that I knew that I had to deal with inwardly with me was, first of all, am I willing to give up control? And secondly, how much of this is attached to my identity?
Wow.
How much of this is attached to my identity? And if you're going to do transition well, there are some other issues, but those feel like the two kind of, ghosts in the closet that come out and haunt you in the middle of the night and say, are you really sure you want to do this? I mean, are you really sure you want to do this? Yeah. Right? And so for me, having dealt with those things, that no, I'm not opposed to giving up control, and I'm not getting out of the car altogether. I told you guys, I mean, there's 4 of us in the car. There's 4 seats in the car. I'm just getting out of the front left spot. I'm moving to the back seat, not as a back seat driver.
Yeah.
Right. Don't come in. Oh, I see where Jim is. He's in the back seat looking over Frank's shoulder. I'm actually not doing that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk some about why that is. But I think unless you've personally dealt with identity and control, it's going to be hard for you to find anybody who can come along and do transition well with you.
I agree 100%. And you have done that masterfully. I'm not going to imply that it's been easy. I don't know how hard it's been for you, how many conversations you've had with Nancy. You've shared a little bit with me. I'm sure it's way more than what I understand. Yeah. But that's a big endeavor. And so let's start here. What made you think that now was the right time? Because, I mean, just summer, spring 2022, you doubled down and became the sole owner and sole principal of Generis. That wasn't that long ago. So you're like, no, I'm in on this. I'm not going anywhere. So you gave no move that you were scaling back. And once again, you're still part of the organization in a massive way. But what led you to go, okay, here's a few years later, it's time? What happened in you or in the organization that would lead you to even think that it's time to do a transition?
Well, that's a great place to start because, I mean, it has all the appearances of I'm going to do more, not less.
Right.
Right? But what was always going on in the background for me was, and I can't even count how many conversations I've had with the Lord about this, who's going to take this and run with it? Not so much ownership, because this is not an ownership transition. It's just a leadership transition. Ownership will happen when it happens. But it's a leadership transition, and that's big. And for me, the reason that I had so many conversations with the Lord is, for anybody who knows, I'm not going to try to tell the larger story. This goes back to an altar call in 1991 on a men's retreat where I didn't know what God was speaking to me about. I thought he was calling me to drop what I was doing as a vice president and CFO of a publicly held company and go to seminary. That wasn't what he was calling me to do. It turns out this is what he was calling me to do.
Wow.
A year later, right? So this is something that God birthed in me, and it's become really what will be my vocational legacy. And so this is not just about, Jim running this thing and, and spinning it up and get it to a point and cash out and then leave and walk out the door. No, that's not what we're trying to do here.
Right.
You've heard me say many, many times, I want the greatest days of Generis to occur after my turn as CEO and leader is over. After that I've put the firm in position to thrive and flourish even more after I'm gone. I think that's what leadership is all about. Yeah. And I see so many people. By the way, you've got, in dealing with all of this, Frank, it's not just identity and control. It's any other insecurities that are getting in your way on a regular basis, right? So I know some people, not going to list any people outright, but I know some people that they're just kind of concerned with, I just want to maximize it and then walk away. Well, that's not leadership.
Right.
That maybe makes you look good, but you look bad in the aftermath of that because you didn't set it up to thrive after you were gone. So my sole mission, probably for the last 10 years, about since I turned 60. So my sole mission has been to think through, how do I put this organization, this baby, this thing that God has given me, how do I put that in position where it can do so well after I'm gone and just keep doing what we want to do, which is, our whole thing, we look like a consulting organization, but what we really are is we're an organization that wants to use consulting to get inside your church or your nonprofit and help change the conversation about faith and money in the American church.
Yeah.
Which includes nonprofits, right?
Absolutely.
And so I started having all of these conversations. I wasn't telling anybody about it because I was like, I don't see anybody on the horizon that fits that criteria.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't in 22 when I bought out Brad's interest
Right.
and became sole owner. So it wasn't there, but I was like talking to God about it more than I talked to Nancy about it. I mean, I'd tell her, but she's like, honey, God's always led us in a good direction here, so we're just going to trust him on that. And I was like, yeah. But the clock's running, babe. The clock's running.
Yeah.
I mean, I still love, pushing the levers and pushing the buttons and everything, and I don't feel like I've lost my fastball.
Right.
Right? So it's not that. It's just there has to be a right time. And, as we'll talk through this here, the picture began to develop for me right in front of my face, and I couldn't deny it. And that's really what led to it.
I think that's interesting to me that you were already doing the hard work of thinking vocational legacy. You were already thinking through what that's going to look like for you personally, both emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, all the things. You're just having to wrestle with that. Look yourself in the mirror. No one else can do that for you. You can have some good advice, some good insight, some things to reflect on, but ultimately that's on you. You have to do that in order to do what was next. What you said is to wait to see what God would move and do. And I think a lot of people, they may be hearing from their board that it might be time, but if they haven't done that work, then the radar cannot be up. They cannot see that God may be orchestrating here if they've not been doing that work personally, even if somebody else is giving advice, wisdom. In this case, no one's telling you what to do, Jim. And I will agree, and anybody that spends time with you, you have not lost your fastball. The way that you serve churches and leaders and the pace at which you go is remarkable. And people may not understand that or know the amount of travel and still having a great time with your family. Like, you are so disciplined and focused and driven. And it's really inspiring in the healthiest of ways. But I mean, you go hard. Like, sometimes you make me tired, Jim. I mean, you're at it. And so it wasn't this like, man, I've got to throw in the towel over the next year. You have no interest in retirement and just disappearing and just going to golf all the time.
No.
Maybe golf a little more.
Maybe a little
right?
more.
Maybe a little more.
Right.
But so with that.
Which by the way, Frank, when people ask me, have you retired yet? I mean, the whole question of retirement is, it's not bad or good necessarily. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
And I've settled that question like 10 years
great
ago.
observation.
So if retirement was never the goal, why would you be working toward that? Wow. Legacy was the goal.
Yeah.
Legacy is the goal. So that's what I'm working towards. So everything becomes a part of that. And then, redeployment is probably a better word for me. I just need to wake up and have something meaningful to do in the morning with my life. And as much as I love to play golf and, fish, hunt, do some of the other things that I like to do, it's all about legacy. And so, and it's nothing wrong with if your goal is retirement, you hit your number at 65, go, bro. That's good.
Yeah.
That's just not me.
Yeah.
That's just not me.
So while you were doing the hard work over the last few years, the inner work, the harder work of this, like systems and processes and things like that, that's not the hard part. The main part of succession, I really believe, is the work of the leader to do the handoff the right way. You just said in February 2022 or summer 2022, whatever it was, sometime in 2022, you're like, hey, this is now mine. I've doubled down. I need to think about vocational legacy, but I don't see anything on the horizon. That wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago.
So this could feel a little fast. So talk about the transition, how we got here, and does this, from your side of things, feel fast or slow, or have you guys processed that?
Well, so what happened was in February 2022, you were one of the very few people who knew in advance that I was in the process of buying out Brad. Mm-hmm. And I brought you on as a consultant to the company because I knew that I needed somebody in the room with me to help me process thinking and decisions and other things. And I wouldn't have a business partner to do that any longer. So I needed somebody to help me do that. And I've long respected your perspective on the church and your knowledge of the church and your savvy about the church. And so I guess your unofficial job description was to listen to the 10 things that I would come up with and tell me the 9 that are so stupid they don't need to make it out the door. And the 1 helped me to look at a lot better than it sounded when I told you the first time, right? But it was really strategy, and it was other things because, Jess, your wife had been on our team for a while, so you'd been around as a spouse. You knew us, so it wasn't a foreign entity to you. And you and I always had good conversations, so that kind of started it. Mm-hmm. But what happened over the next 2.5 years was I watched you move from somebody who was observing and advising to somebody who really loved what we were doing.
Yeah.
And it was in spring of probably 2024 that the light came on for me. I was like, oh, wait a second. I think this might be it. Mm-hmm. And you and I started some very general conversations that then got more and more specific.
Yeah.
And so for me, the timing was, I could have put it off for a while.
Sure.
But I felt like I was ready. I felt like you were ready. Mm-hmm. And I had watched the team gain respect for you as you were not just sitting at the tables while we're doing exercises, you were leaning in and contributing, and you're doing the scribbling on the white chart, and you're doing the presentations to the room. And, people are like, Frank had a great take on this. The team is just really, resonating with you and your ideas and the way you're leaning in. And that was just a really obvious clue to me that like, okay, here we go. I could have waited a while, but why? It was ready. You were ready. And it turns out our team was ready because one of the people who's been a long timer, I was kind of so engrossed in making the announcement to our team when we told them. And so I asked one of our long timers, you know who I'm talking about, because I've told you about this a couple of times. I said to him, I was like, hey, so what did you see what happened in the room when I made the announcement? I was kind of engrossed and I was not really, I said, felt right. And he's like, I don't think anybody noticed. It's just like, it didn't even create a ripple. It's like, hey boss, thanks for letting us know, but we already figured this out.
Yeah.
Which is how I started off with the announcement, was to say, hey, look, I want to talk to you about a story you've seen developing right in front of your face for the last 3 years. So let me go to the end, and then let me back it up. And it didn't feel like anybody was surprised, which I think validated that it was the right time. It was the right time. I was ready for you to do it. You were ready to step into it, and the team was ready for it.
Yeah.
And I just think that's almost I don't mean to over spiritualize this, but this is a God story, Frank, as much as it is anything else, because I didn't see anybody, and you kind of veered in, came off the horizon, and kind of got front and center in the scope, and I was like, oh, there he is, right there. Yeah. It's kind of hard to deny that.
I feel the same way. Certainly, that it was a God story and the way it was orchestrated. It could only be God, because I would not have applied or approached this, or this wasn't my path forward. And so you inviting me to be like, hey, could you just give a little time, be in some conversations with me? That was your end game at the time. You were just trying to be a good steward of your organization.
I had no idea that would lead to this, by the way. No, just for clarity to everybody. Don't think Jim's some great genius and saw God on the move and invited a friend. That is not how this happened.
Yeah.
I had no idea, because you've always had 2 or 3 things that you've leaned into.
Always.
And the one thing I wasn't going to do is turn it over to somebody who had several plates spinning. And you always loved doing that stuff. And so I never had an idea early on. I just wanted you in the room as an advisor in this season where I'm taking over full ownership.
Yeah. And I enjoyed that and found like it was helpful and felt valued by you as we would wrestle with those dumb ideas. There were some good ones in there too.
Every now and then.
I will tell you this. One of the things that was such a blessing to get to do was there were plenty of really good ideas that in the tyranny, just like we help churches do now, in the tyranny of the day-to-day, there are ideas that come up that are fruitful, but it's just like, who's going to own that and kind of go bring that to life? And so there were some things that was like, hey, you guys have talked about this a few times. How come we just haven't done that yet? Like somebody just needs to pull the trigger. And so there was some low-hanging fruit there from a leadership standpoint, an opportunity just to kind of step in and fill a gap there and kind of do that. The unexpected thing for me was along the way falling in love, like, how would I say? It started like this. It was, okay, serve the organization because I love what they're doing for the church, to genuinely caring for you and loving working with you. Okay, so that was the next step for me. Then it was loving our team and just being like, wow, the way these people are serving above and beyond, the character of the organization, the integrity of the organization, the posture and serving little challenges that come up in the church world. That was inspiring, knowing that you had this kind of eclectic group of pretty big personalities that are all unified around this vision and direction. That was all compelling to me. And then along the way, I wasn't doing much of the work of Generis at that point. I was just continuing to work on Generis, but connecting with the people. And then over time, started to read more of what had come out of your heart and mind and other leaders in our organization's mind. And then started to ask questions about how we do stuff and how we started this church, and then hearing more and more stories of how God was using Generis and the people of Generis to serve and do incredible kingdom work. And that's when I started to feel this shift. And I thought it was more like, I'm going to be a bigger fan of Generis. That's what it felt like. I was like, oh man, I thought I liked them. No, I really like them. I'm going to get to that raving fan status where it's going to just permeate my conversations. Gosh, when I'm doing kingdom work, I'm going to not be able to hold back in sharing some of the great things that are happening at Generis. I've started to feel that shift. So it was a love of the church that we all get to serve, then a love for you, and through that a love for Nancy, and then a love for the team. Before being like, oh, I might be the guy to help champion this and kind of mission this. And why don't you share the story of when we started to tell a handful of people to process with, maybe some of the people you process with, and I can tell the story of when I told my wife that we might be looking to do this, which is fun too.
Well, you want to kind of test it a little bit before you go big on it. And there were a couple of people on the team that I just like, hey, if we were headed in the direction of this, what would be the response? What do you think people would be on? How would the team react to this? And it was very positive from a couple of people that I trust and know the temperature of the team, kind of the conversations beyond the conversations. They're the one that hear those conversations. By the way, one of those persons told you recently, there is zero conversation beyond the conversation about this. Nothing. He's like, I hear those conversations and there's nothing. So, I was starting to get kind of a sense that this could work. And then I said to you, because one of the things I'm going to kind of take a read on is what does your spouse think about this? And Jess was here before you were. Right. I mean, she was here in 2017, so she was here before you were. And so we were having one of those conversations. And I said, hey, Frank, I haven't asked you this yet, but what does Jessica think about all of this? And
I had recently processed with her, right? Very recently. We go for a nightly walk, and we have our little 2.2 mile little circle that we do, and sometimes pushing the kids, sometimes walking just the two of us. And I said, hey, babe, I know this wasn't part of the plan, and I always do kind of a bunch of stuff, but Jim and I have had a conversation. I wonder what it could look like if I were to have the opportunity to take the lead at Generis. And she just looked at me and said, well, I was just waiting on the two of you to figure it out. And so it was like, I mean,
why didn't we ask her earlier? We should have asked her earlier.
She should have spoke up.
Right?
Just tell me what to do.
Help us.
And
she
was like,
sister.
hey, it's going to be on your own timing. But she knew the way I'm wired, and you've alluded to that earlier. I've always had like multiple things going, and part of that's my upbringing and probably some unhealthy things in there too. But also wanting to be really challenged by something complex and having multiple things going. And then I got inside of Generis and realized that, first of all, this is something I could give my life to. And second, because I love to serve churches and nonprofits that are doing great kingdom work. I love it, love it, love it. That was already true. It just didn't know it could be. I didn't know it could be in this context. So I knew that to be true. This was an interesting context. And then when I started to get to the point to go, oh, there's enough variety here, enough challenge, enough complexity, enough organizations that we serve that I could go all in and not get bored or be under challenged in a very short period of time. And so I had to wrestle with it on that side to go, okay, this is a tremendous opportunity. Is this opportunity for me? Because it was very clear with the way you had been communicating things along the way and just processing out loud, just that vocational legacy and just some other side conversations we had, not about me, just in general, that this needed to be somebody that was all in, that saw this as their future, not somebody that's like, oh, you may have we'll do a chess move and they'll be here for 3 or 4 years and somebody else will do this and it'll kind of piece together. That wouldn't work. And so,
I wasn't looking for the guy after the guy. I was looking
right.
for the person who's going to be here long term.
Yeah. And I fell in love with the work. So why don't we do this? I want to ask you one more question.
There was another place of confirmation along the way.
Yeah.
So last summer, our June 2024 meeting was one of my key confirmations. Jessica was the second one. She was really kind of the final straw for me. But at our June 2024 meeting, it was on Thursday, we did an exercise with the team. Actually, you and Leanne and Brandon had done that with me separately. It's a very vulnerable exercise. I'm not going to go into the details here. Most companies wouldn't have the courage to do this with their people because you're exposing yourself pretty significantly. But we did that with our team, which was a great culture enhancer, I think, to be that vulnerable with the team. But you and Brandon and Leanne led that with zero participation from me.
Yeah.
And so that afternoon, Nancy and I were sitting around in our room and we were getting ready for dinner and just kind of having our late afternoon conversation as we typically do. And I said, how was your day? She was also some of the spouses. And she says, how was your day? And I said, it was a really good day. And then I said, I think it was a historic day. And she said, why is that? And I said, sweetheart, I think I saw the future of Generis today.
Wow.
When I saw the three of you lead that exercise so well and develop so much rapport with our team, and I didn't have to stand up there and be a part of it.
Wow.
And, she looked at me, and it was almost like with tears in her eyes. She's like, you've been praying for that for a long time, haven't you? I said, you have no idea. Wow. You have no idea. So that's
incredible.
So that, and then when Jessica said that, I was like, it's just a matter of time now.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the things, all those conversations that you and I had in 2022 and 23, when people said to us when we debuted our podcast, how did you have all this rapport? And this is a lot of some of the early episodes were the conversations we had, and that's why we had the great rapport.
That's right.
Because basically we were just doing podcast episodes, and now we're just hanging a microphone in all those conversations you and I had.
That's exactly
right. So that's
Which
why we're here, actually.
Helped the transition so
did.
well. So here's what we're going to do. I was looking at our time. I think we should wrap up this episode.
Let's do that.
And we're going to come back with a second part to this episode.
Let's do that.
And it's going to be more of the practical, tactical, who did what, how did we do this, why did you choose this, why did I do that, where are we still figuring out, and where have we already kind of drawn some lines for some clarity for the team and others. So let's get real practical with it on the next episode.
I love that idea. So we'll be right back with another episode of Next Sunday Podcast to continue this conversation.
Hey-o!
Leadership transitions are about more than titles. They're about trust, timing, and stewarding a mission well. As Frank steps into this new role, the future of Generis is rooted in legacy, shaped by vision, and committed to the church.
Transitions don't end a story.
They begin a new chapter.
And we believe what's ahead is even greater than what's behind.